So, where do I go with this? This whole time I've been talking with the mic off. And I've been saying today's not going to go very well. Well, here we go, right? So to reiterate, today I'm supposed to be drawing Felicia from Darkstalkers. Brandon came over a couple days, I gave him an art tutorial, and I can't find my pencil now. And I'm hoping he didn't take the fucking thing. So give me a second. Gosh, I just knew this was going to be. Some days, most days, You turn it on, everything goes well. Some days, like today, you know, once you turn it on, everything decides to go to shit. I mean, whatever. But I got kind of an important thing to do this afternoon, and I don't really need trouble today. I need today to just work itself out. So this is gonna be some saucy art. I'm not gonna paint today. Paint tomorrow. Felicia from Darkstalkers. So we'll just kind of get to it. If you notice all the weird start and stop videos going on in the beginning of the cast, I don't have. I use OBS, and you have to put the videos in order. So I just decided I'm not clicking. I have a loading, an intro, a live, and an exit scene. I need to click each one in order. And when it starts a scene that has a video, like the one that starts when we're the intro video, it doesn't stop it when you off click. It will just keep, the music will keep going. The video will stop, but the music from that video will just keep going. So I realized I clicked on the wrong one. I clicked on live cast instead of intro, and that's how you saw me. And I'm like, let me just renumber these really quick. And that was comedy of errors. So it's fixed. Good times. Hey, what's up? This is from a video game called Darkstalkers. Classic retro game. It's a fighting game that featured monsters. Capcom made. The guys who made Street Fighter. Catwoman. Yes, Catwoman redesign. All right, let's start inking. Rough by pencil, ink on the computer. Actually, that's how I did the April. I drew it mostly with Copic multiliners and then I inked that. I prefer to do that because when it gets into getting little details, it's easier to just to use a little multiliner than to sit here and mess. As for streaming on YouTube, sorry, I wasn't looking up, folks. Um, you just use OBS recorder, and yeah, there's a 30-second delay. It's no different than streaming to Twitch, only you go straight to YouTube. The difference with inking here is I'm going to paint over this, so there's no point to. It's part of my painting process. But I try not to do fine details with pencil because it can cause uh, carpal tunnel. You start to really noodle and try to get all these things and get them all clean, it's irrelevant. So I'd rather just go loose and then I can do all my details. Either a traditional or digital inks, you know. And I haven't had any problems with carpal tunnel since I started doing that. I'll do 100% pencil when I'm doing like gritty stuff, like, you know, the He-Man, the gritty thing. Do I do my thumbnails first or have at it? No, I usually do a roughie digitally. So I set it all up digitally. Shit, smudge that. Gotta make sure you don't. That'll blend in with the final paints. Um, I do my roughie in silhouettes. I design in silhouettes, so I'll draw the silhouette and then I draw the character into the silhouette digitally, and then I'll print it out and do the final here. Unless it's a complicated piece like the Chrono Trigger, and then I'll draw it all digitally. But this is going to be painted, so no point. I'll do the saucy paints on this. So I'm using this watercolor, this waterproof ink. It's a burnt sienna, so it'll have a nice colorful tone to it. That's Brandon calling me. I'm busy. I'll have at it when I'm at a con doing convention commissions and stuff. But while I'm here, I will, in studio, I will plan it through. Within my time limits. I do set up time limit goals for studio art. So this is based around trying to get each one done in 4 hours from design to final paints. I think I'm a little over that. I add these black inks to the final paints that seem to be eating up a little bit of time. For me, art is a process, you know. Not a born illustrator. I've had to really learn all this. Yeah, I design in silhouettes. So I make the silhouette of the character a big. I have a playlist for art tips, designing in silhouettes. Um, and so I design in a shape, like a black shape. I'll work her out as just a black image. And I sort of build the shapes up in my mind while I'm doing that. And then I turn the opacity down and draw into her. So I can just blob in the hand, blob in the hair shape, and turn it down, work that out, versus endlessly drawing stick figures that you build stuff on top. You know, it's really about shape construction. Like this hand was a giant shape. And then what I'll do, like for more complicated pieces, multiple characters, I'll take that shape and I'll actually build the character out. I'll sketch over and then I'll build, color parts and stuff and draw into that. So. Fucking Brandon, dude. This guy. Yeah, I'm streaming. I wouldn't care, but I'm like, we're trying to record extra videos with the camera phone for Instagram. Yeah, no shit, you're bad. And every time I have to take the phone off the tripod, I have to reset it up. So it's a little annoying. Needs to respect that process. Where did I train? My room. Self-taught. I went to the Art Institute and learned jack shit. Learned how to make videos. That's what I'm doing here. Signed up for art and they turned me into a 3D modeling and texturing and how to make videos programs. It was a complete waste of fucking time and money. By the time I realized how much I got suckered for, I was in it too far. I was like, well, I may as well get the degree out of this fucking bullshit. But no, it's all self-trained when it comes to my art. The silhouettes came from, I found it easier to sketch with markers. I started using markers about 12, 13 years ago. Like, sometimes Sharpies, sometimes just, like, I'd get a cool gray marker. At the time, Prismacolor, they were the only ones that made the chart packs before we had Copics over here. And so I would draw silhouettes with that, shade with marker, and then take tracing paper or have to light board. Then I bought a scanner and I was like, well, I could scan this stuff in. And then I got a Intuos pen to do coloring and realized I could refine those. And then eventually they made the Cintiq and I got the version 2. And then I started drawing digitally because I was having carpal tunnel. I was doing a lot of super details by hand with pencil, because I was like, I'm never going to be an inker, so I got to do everything by pencil, draw every little thing, and I did, and I almost took myself out of drawing entirely from pressing too hard with the pencil. In terms of painting, here, my room too. I always wanted to watercolor paint. And never thought I was good enough to. Eventually, I just got tired of it. I'm like, well, I'll just try. So I spent the last 5 years just trying to do something with that. I have a playlist called Podcast Archive, and in the archive is something called Rob FAQ, FAQ. I think it's around episode 30, 32, 35, around there. I recorded it years ago, and that really covers my entire history as of 2013. Yeah, they're super expensive, the 13 HD, but the color gamut's wrong too, so I got the 22. I used to have an 18. I prefer the 18. But I do this professionally, so I make my money back, you know. I mean, it's already paid for itself, so I wouldn't get one as a hobby unless you were super serious. But for me, at the time, I was doing a graphic novel for Death Junior, which was a video game. It was 2008, and I had to do all my own inking. I was like, I am not going to do that traditionally. So I learned how to draw 100% digital. If you see the Chrono Trigger piece I've been working on, that's all digital, drawn digitally. So, and it's a process again of drawing in silhouettes, doing rough lines over the silhouettes, building up color to kind of block out the shapes, and then turning the opacity down and then building on top of that. So I have the color palette figured out before I start. I record every process. I have speed paint playlists. And I do commentary on those now. So I walk people through, you know, the shorthand version of everything. Yeah. Sort of believe in trying to open source, work process, so artists don't waste their time spending years trying to do things that, you're like, hey, I did that, and I don't know if that might be what you're trying to accomplish, right? Not so much how I draw, but trying to figure out what you're trying to accomplish and how to get there as quick as humanly possible. That's the goal of SketchCraft. And I record all this stuff because I forget. I forget how I do things. Yeah, I just stick with Photoshop. It's what I trained in. It's what I know. I use it to do my drawing, my coloring, my color processing. I mean, I do all my own. I use InDesign and it's integrated with Photoshop. So at this point, I don't see myself changing that process. You get to a point you find out what works for you, and you get to making things. So if that is working for you, stick with it. But I've been using Photoshop since 1994. So there's very little I can't do with it. Yes, I've given up trying new programs. I spend all my time making stuff now. It's just it can be it can be a quagmire. If I need watercolor brushes, I just watercolor. If I need textured, super textury things, I can do Copics, scan them in, and paint over that. Then I'll get a nice painted acrylic look. So I pray that every artist figures out what program they enjoy using as soon as humanly possible so that they can get to making things. Because it's kind of like I love Skyrim and Oblivion, but I know me, if I play those on PC, I will spend forever just modding it. You know, I'll try this mod, I'll try that mod, I'll install this, I'll try these textures and that textures, and I never actually play the game. You know, I'm not saying that's what you're doing, just saying for me. Right, Shiza. I'll work around that. But yeah, I've tried them all: Manga Studio, Paint Shop. I mean, even Paint Shop Pro back in the day, Sketchbook. You know, people like to send me links all the time. Try this one, try that one, try this one. I just say thanks. I'll give it a. These days, for some reason, sometimes people get really bothered when you're like, no, thank you. So I just always go, oh, that's awesome, and I move on. But I had one guy goes, I just like that this program looks better than Photoshop. I'm like, then use that. I don't, it's strange. Well, Kyle was telling me, he's like, yeah, dude, there's this VR app that lets you draw in 3D. I'm like, when I go to VR, the last thing I want to do is draw. I'm just saying. It's like when I go to VR, I want to time travel. Maybe explore galaxies. Like I draw in my room all day, bro. Like I can't see how that helps. That it's hilarious. Well, the benefit to using this ink when I'm painting is that it'll give the lines life, so it won't be black everywhere. So the skin will have skin color tones, the hair, the body type, and then um, when it's dry, I can go and add blacks wherever shadows need to be. So when I'm just regularly like inking my line art, I prefer to use Copic multiliners. I've tried their sepia pens, and I don't like them. Uh, but when I'm doing the watercolor, I need to use this ink. I have tried hundreds, hundreds of different inks. This is the stuff that so far I like the most. So I bought a grip of it, so I at least get a few years worth if they ever stop making it. Plus, I just always wanted to use a nib, you know. So I got these comic delators, Maru nibs. which I like better than 102 because I've used this nib for 100 drawings now, and it's still going. So when it dries, I'll erase the lines. When I'm all done, I'll scan it so I have a backup. So if I'm painting and the thing gets ruined, I can always print the lines back out and just re-ink right over what I already drew. So you don't lose much time. I really don't like. Once you take away the fear of failure, like, okay, what if I spill ink all over this? It's ruined forever. Well, no, I have the lines. I can just print them back out and start over, you know. Once that happens, you know, things speed up because you're not afraid you're gonna. Same with like these little smudges. It doesn't really matter once it's ink. Once it's painted, you're not gonna notice. Any good book, right? No. I found all the inking books I've seen are based around using like a brush or something like that. So, you know, um, a lot of the books are just really horrible. They're based around like how to draw fantasy characters, how to ink for comic books, and you're like that. I mean, I've I spent a lot of time talking to comic book artists. I'm 38 this year. I turned 38. I'm 37. I grew up going to San Diego Comic Con, right? And so I spent a lot of my years asking those guys what they would use, and you get these really technical question answers, and then you know like Kevin Eastman's like, oh, I used a Sharpie, you know, like that's a Sharpie and that's a a micron. So I get the thin with the micron, and then I add the Sharpie for the thicker lines. And there's no one way to do it, you know. It's what sort of clicks with you. And what you prefer, you know. So for myself, I don't really care about using a brush. I like more technical lines. So I'll draw it with a pen, and then I can do my nice thick and thin digitally. Turn the opacity down, go back over it, and then use my oil brush and go over and make the thick and thin. So I've tried coloring over my inks, my traditional inks, like digitally. It doesn't look very good. The Copic multiliners, I don't know. I don't like the look of it. They look fine on the paper, but once they get colored, I don't know. Right. Just go here. Art gum is your friend. So I'm more really drawing with the ink than I am like inking, you know, in the traditional sense. Only downside to using a nib is you have to do like half circles. To get a circle, you gotta do half a circle and another half a circle. Oh, she has a tail. It's got a big kitty costume. So I don't ink the hair. Actually, that I need to ink. Depends on shape language. Do you hit the character? To let the character dictate the shapes. Uh, Depends. You know, basically you're talking about do I shove my, do I apply how I draw to the character or do I draw the character as people sort of recognize them, choosing those shapes or do I exaggerate? And I said it depends. Depends on what the expectation's going for. On the terms of Chrono Trigger, like I'm doing that Chrono Trigger tribute piece. I'm applying, how I would draw the characters within the expected, you know, belief of how they're, of how they look to the original Kira Toriyama designs, with the um, I could go much further. Sometimes I go much further. Like with the He-Man stuff, I do that really gritty pencils. That's nothing like what He-Man looks like. But, it's a look that I think would be, I'm intentionally trying something different. In this case, this is nostalgia. Like, I'll be using this in my book Game Cave for a Darkstalkers review and stuff like that. And so I need to look like the characters, and I'll exaggerate. Like I'll make her hands bigger than they are. The watercolor that I'll be doing, the drips, will add enough newness, so it won't just be like, oh, he redrew. This is not a picture of her from the game art that I redrew, right? So it's like, wow, I look at a picture, I draw her. Like that's not it at all. Um, I have considered, not right now because I got enough to do, but in the next year or so, coming up with some name where I could be like, all right, let me do like a crazy interpretation of some characters. But before I get to that point, it's kind of best to kind of go through. something that is. I mean, I'm gonna draw more cartoony, anyhow. So I naturally mix American and Japanese styles because that's how I grew up. I grew up with one hand in anime and one hand in manga and comic books. I grew up with Robotech and Transformers and shit. So um, I think the painting style will add something different to this. Well, retaining, the undercore drawing is retaining the flavor for it. I've made mistakes in my career where I used to work in gaming magazines, right? So the last issue I did for Play magazine, I worked there. We were reviewing Mass Effect 2. And those covers were paid for, by EA. So they would foot the bill. But they had to approve the art. And I tried to do it in a style that is not associated with the look of. It wasn't even a comic book style. It was like a really kind of grittier comic book style. And it didn't go over very well. So I'm not the kind of guy who's like Sean Galloway has a great, that minimalist sort of cool cartoon look, and he could take Spawn and turn it into that, and that's amazing. But for me, I would find something that inherently would appeal to a Spawn fan, and then try to find a different thing to punch up. Or in this case, like with the watercolor, if it was digital, then maybe a mixture of like painted backgrounds or something. I try to make sure that whatever I do doesn't alienate the core fan too much, you know. Um, but I do have crazier ideas in my head, like, oh, I could do this, I could warp this, I could do these crazy shapes, and so I've been thinking, when the appropriate time sort of to be doing that would be. And right now is not the time. Yeah. Because it kind of comes back from the idea that, if you understand the rules, you can break them. So, that being said, with Lead Heavy, I am working with him so that his stuff will become more stylized, less core centric. But it's based upon like helping him too with ground foundational drawing. Like a lot of people throw their style into something because they just can't draw. Like that's the reality. Like I draw hands this way because I don't know actually how to draw hands. So you can do it so long as you understand the fundamental construction. You know, that's how I feel. Otherwise, you just become a parody of yourself. You see artists that do that a lot too. Like where they get a look and they do it so often they start to become like a goof on themselves in a way. Like if they draw, like I draw some big hands and the hands get bigger and bigger and bigger and then they don't even make any sense. And because they get pretty popular, they just keep drawing super super fast. So I always try to like revert back a few times, to core construction, so I can never really start to parody myself too much. I'm changing him. He's gotten a lot better. You listen to those old podcasts, you see what he's doing now. I've had an effect. And over the past year, he's followed, more and more. So it's getting there. In a couple years, people go, "Really? You didn't know how to draw?" And so he'll be like, "Yeah." But he was one of those guys that was just like, "I'm just gonna sit down and draw Spider-Man today," and I'm like, "That's great, but don't expect people to pay you $50 for it." You know? Well, why? I go to a con, they make money, I make money. I'm like, okay, is this about making money to you? Because if it's about making money, play the stock market. You know? I have friends who I told Brandon at some point, I'm like, I think you could make more money recycling cans. If this is about money, like, Is it? Is it really about money? Because it should really connect. It really should. I mean, you got to sell your art, but excite people. Create something that people go, man, I really want to own that. Or they learn them and then just after a while be like, I learned that and move on. And then just gotta careful you don't parody yourself too much. Gotta know when to stop too. Like when I first started doing the watercolor stuff, I did like 100 of them. I just said, oh, $10, and it really was just because I wanted to learn what you couldn't do with it. What is probably not a good idea. And then I took a year off. And then I came back and tried a few other pieces, and I mixed digital backgrounds with painting over the watercolors, and then I took another year off, and then I experimented with more different paints, and that's sort of how I've arrived at doing the Victor. You know, some of these newer ones was just trial and error, and the Deathstroke, the Batgirl, the Nightwing, like that's the foundational of where this is all going over the next few years. But it doesn't mean that I'm doing it to crank out a million saucy prints. So when I go to con, I can sell 100 prints. Like that's not the goal. And you see that mentality. Then you got people doing Photoshop filters over other people's art. That creates that look. And we had a conversation on last night's cast, episode 32, how to work collectability in your art. But the real conversation was about like authenticity. You know, like if you're gonna do something, be authentic. Do it because you really have a passion to do it. Don't just start doing shit because you saw that shit trending on Etsy or Pinterest. I will paint tomorrow. I will paint her tomorrow. I've got a few errands I gotta run today. So I think that'll do it, folks. She's ready to go. So that took about an hour, give or take, minus the messing with the camera. I'll be painting around 1 o'clock Pacific Standard, around there. I get started between 1 and 2, give or take my schedule. Sometimes Amazon shows up. Yeah. How about the hair? I just paint over it, man. I don't ink the hair. So I'll paint it, and the hair looks more natural that way when you don't actually add inks. So before I start, I just take this art eraser and I kind of barely erase it so it's there, and then I paint right over that. So we'll do that all tomorrow. Anytime, Rob. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, it ends up softer. It's nice. I will see you tomorrow, folks. Peace. I'm gonna go get some coffee.